Less than a century and a half after the invention of the reaper, the harvest was so speeded that America's grain growers could feed a nation of 215 million. And at the same time, help greatly to feed increasing numbers of the world's hungry and starving people. Every year, the world's population is increasing by 50 million. In less than 10 years, American farmers will be called upon to increase exports of major food crops by more than half again. More and more, those growing millions abroad will look to the American farmer for help in meeting their urgent needs for food. They will irrigate more of their land. They will protect and push their crops with more effective application of fertilizers, insecticides, and weed killers. They will plant in narrow rows and double crop and interseed and bring to harvest heavier, denser crops. But can today's combines manage the super crops of tomorrow? The basic mechanism of the conventional combine, little changed since its inception, is fast-reaching obsolescence. Though still an engineering marvel, it is not as efficient as one would like. It can cause grain damage that lowers the grade and value of the crop. Unfortunately, the waste is greatest at high ground speeds. Big volumes of crop to be handled at high moisture levels. Exactly the conditions that will prevail in the years ahead. Clearly, something better has been needed, and now is urgently needed. An engineering facility in East Moline, Illinois, and a new concept in the design of combines. The engineers were searching not for cosmetic change or minor improvement, but for a radical departure, a breakthrough in the technology of combining. Their work showed great promise. In 1965, a new type of combine went into the field for testing. Under conventional sheet metal, it had been implanted with a new heart, a threshing and separating mechanism incorporating a revolutionary new concept. This was an axial flow combine. There followed a full decade of research and development, of testing and refinement. Finally, the year and the day of decision. The concept, the cost, the commitment, the recommendation that monies be allocated to place the new models on the market. Now the company looked to the engineers and production men. The time frame was a scant 2 years. The planning network showed scores of separate functions and thousands of process steps. The company looked to the fabrication shops, tooling, the designers of production lines and new machine tools, designing for mass production, thousands of parts and components, each explicitly defined by a blueprint. Building a complete machine by hand, not for sale, but to prove design. The first prototype, completely functional in every respect. Then several prototypes for lab testing under controlled conditions and precise instrumentation. And then field testing. Dozens of different crops in all parts of the country. The entire spectrum of crop and field conditions. The testers ask only one basic question. Does the machine meet design criteria? Performing as theory says it should, and as users will say it must. The answer must be a resounding yes. Test data must fully confirm the reliability and performance potential of the axial flow concept. The axial flow mechanism has just two main assemblies. A stationary chamber or housing containing a concave element and a revolving rotor. Mounted on the rotor are impellers to move the crop and rasp bars which do the actual work of threshing. As the rotor turns, the impellers gather the crop and speed it to the rear in a helical path to the rasp bars. As the rotor turns, the rasp bars rub the material repeatedly against the concave. Continuing the rearward spiral, the crop passes repeatedly over a separating grate. Here, centrifugal force carries the grain through the grate and into the cleaning system. With repeated passes through the mechanism, the grain need not be rubbed and impacted as severely against the concave. Thus, there's little grain damage. Similarly, with repeated passes over the grate, more of the grain is saved. Little or none goes out with the straw. With its high efficiency, the axial flow principle permits combining dense crops at high moisture levels and high ground speeds with less grain loss and damage, thus meeting that urgent need. The farmer looks ahead to heavier, denser crops. His fields more closely planted, more and more productive. He has months to bring his crops along from seed to maturity. But he has only a few days for harvesting, days when he could lose much or all of his crop to weather. The speed, capacity, and dependability of his equipment must make the most of every day of good harvesting conditions. From June through December 1976, a unique fleet of hand-built axial flow combines followed the harvest from Texas to the northern plains, then back to the Midwest and the Mid-South. This was pre-production testing in the farmers' hands and on their lands. Part of the equation of a combine's productivity is acres per hour. Time and acreage are measurable. Acres per hour are convertible into dollar values. The greater the acres per hour, the higher the value of the harvesting system. In corn, these axial flow combines cover more acres per hour and more acres per day than modern conventional combines with the same corn heads. It gave superior performance in wheat and other small grains as well. This combine is handling 60 bushel wheat at nearly 6 miles per hour, making nearly 800 bushels hourly. At that volume, a farmer checks for loss. And in soybeans, similar performance advantages over the best conventional combines. Of course, no combine produces value when it's off the field or standing still. Part of the formula governing return on the crop investment is timeliness of harvest. Here, a rich growth of corn 24 hours after an inch and a half of rain. Yesterday's combines would wait hours or days for the soil to dry and the dampness to leave the crop. But not with today's combine of tomorrow. The corn tested 26% moisture, and the husks were wet. Yet even at high ground speeds, damage and loss were exceptionally low. Stems and leaves are tough and wet. Too wet to go in? Not really. That's timeliness. 7 rows of wet stalks and leaves, 60 bushels of beans to the acre. Timeliness means early completion of the harvest, with less chance of losing part of the crop due to weather. No combine produces value when it's not combining. A larger grain tank means fewer stops. And the new axial flow combines unload almost 2 bushels a second, clearing the tank in about 90 seconds. A second saved is a second earned. Minutes saved are dollars earned. The formula for productivity, simply stated, is more acres per hour plus savings in loss and damage multiplied by field efficiency and machine availability. The prototype combines proved the axial flow concept, proved the engineer's design, proved the efficiency, productivity, and dependability of these machines in the fields.